Have you ever watched someone's face change while you were talking and immediately wondered if you were being too much, too intense, too direct, too serious? Maybe you started speaking less, softened your opinion, held back what you really wanted to say, and if this has happened enough times, you may have reached a familiar conclusion. People just can't handle me. Sometimes that may be true, but there is another possibility that is much harder to consider. Sometimes people are reacting to something inside themselves, and sometimes they are reacting to you. Learning the difference changes everything, because a strong personality can feel very different from the inside than it does from the outside. What feels like passion to you may feel like pressure to someone else. What feels like honesty may sometimes feel like being cornered. What feels like deep interest may feel like being examined. And at the same time, someone really can be uncomfortable with you simply because your confidence, directness, or emotional openness touches something they have not faced in themselves. Both can be true. Jungian psychology gives us a useful idea for understanding part of this: projection. We sometimes place our own fears, wishes, and rejected qualities onto another person without even knowing we are doing it. Maybe you meet someone who speaks with confidence and immediately decide they are arrogant. But perhaps their confidence touches something you have never allowed yourself to express. Maybe someone is emotionally open and you find them overwhelming. Perhaps their openness brings you close to feelings you have spent years avoiding. The reaction is real, but the reason for it may be deeper than either person understands. And yes, people can project onto you too. Someone may dislike your directness because they avoid difficult conversations. Someone may be unsettled by your confidence because they learn to survive by making themselves small. Someone may find your emotional honesty uncomfortable because they are used to keeping everything under control. In those moments, you may not have done anything wrong. You may simply have touched something they were not ready to face. But projection is a possibility. It is not a verdict. And that distinction matters. Because once you learn the language of psychology, it becomes very easy to use it to protect yourself. Someone criticizes you. They're projecting. Someone asks for space. They're afraid of intimacy. Someone becomes distant. They couldn't handle my depth. Maybe, but maybe not. Sometimes people are not frightened by your depth. Sometimes they are tired. Sometimes they feel talked over. Sometimes they feel analyzed. Sometimes they simply do not enjoy the same kind of interaction you do. And sometimes they are giving you useful information about how you affect them. That brings us to a harder question. Not, why are they reacting to me? But, what are they reacting to? Imagine someone tells you, you can be a little intense. What happens inside you? Do you become curious? Or does your mind immediately begin defending you? They're too sensitive. They don't like honesty. They only want shallow conversations. They feel uncomfortable because I see through people. Any of those explanations might contain some truth. But if every uncomfortable reaction always leads to the same answer, you stop learning. You stop receiving information. And slowly, the story that protects you can also begin to isolate you. So turn the situation around for a moment. What is it actually like to be around you? When you ask personal questions, do you notice whether the other person wants to answer? When someone disagrees with you, do you become curious about their view? Or do you begin explaining why they think the way they do? When you are passionate, do you still leave room for the other person to speak? Can someone say, I don't want to talk about that, without you deciding they are afraid, closed off, or emotionally weak? Do people feel seen around you, or sometimes watched? Do they feel invited into the conversation or pulled into a level of emotional intensity they never agreed to? Those questions can be uncomfortable, especially if you have spent years feeling misunderstood. Because when you have been misunderstood often enough, you naturally become protective. You start expecting the next rejection before it happens. A shorter reply, a strange pause, a change in someone's face, and your mind begins filling in the rest. Here we go again. I said too much. They're pulling away. They can't handle me. That story may feel familiar, but familiar does not mean true. Sometimes the person is distracted. Sometimes they need space. Sometimes you really did come on too strongly. And sometimes they genuinely are uncomfortable with a part of you that you should not have to hide. The difficult part is learning to tell the difference. That is why a strong personality needs more than confidence. It needs awareness. Because intensity without awareness can feel completely different from the inside than it does from the outside. From inside, you feel passionate. From outside, someone may feel pressured. From inside, you feel honest. From outside, someone may feel cornered. From inside, you feel focused. From outside, someone may feel there is no room for them. Your intention matters. Their experience matters too. Neither side automatically owns the whole truth, and maturity means learning to hold both. But there's another reason the idea of being too much can become dangerous. It can become an identity. Maybe you really did spend years making yourself smaller. Maybe people told you, calm down, stop asking so many questions, don't be so emotional, don't take everything so seriously. Maybe you learned that acceptance meant becoming easier for other people. So later, when you finally stop doing that, it feels powerful. You begin speaking more honestly. You stop apologizing for your feelings. You stop hiding your ambition. You stop pretending everything is fine when it is not. That can be healthy. But then a new identity can form. I am the intense one. I am the honest one. I am the person who goes deeper than everyone else. And once an identity becomes important, we start protecting it, even from information that might help us grow. A friend says, "You don't really listen when you get passionate," and you hear, "They want me to shrink." Someone says, "Sometimes your questions feel too personal," and you think, "They're afraid of vulnerability." A partner says, "When you're upset, everything becomes very intense," and you hear, "They can't handle the real me." Maybe those people are wrong, but maybe they are not. The point is not to accept every criticism. The point is to stop rejecting every criticism simply because it threatens the person you believe yourself to be. This is where Jung's idea of the shadow becomes much more useful. The shadow is not only the strong part of you that other people told you to hide. It can also include the parts of yourself you would rather not admit are there. The impatient part, the controlling part, the part that desperately wants to be understood but does not always work very hard to understand others. The part that calls itself honest because admitting, "I was too harsh," would hurt. The part that calls other people shallow because admitting, "I don't know how to relax around people," would feel more vulnerable. The part that says, "If they really knew me, they would stay," while making it difficult for anyone to get close enough to know you. This is the uncomfortable side of shadow work. Not discovering that everything people disliked about you was secretly a gift, but becoming willing to ask, what part of their reaction belongs to them, and what part might belong to me? That question does not make you smaller. It makes you harder to fool, especially by yourself. Jung used the word individuation for the long process of becoming more fully yourself. But becoming more yourself does not mean giving every part of your personality complete freedom. It does not mean, "This is who I am. Deal with it." That is not growth. That is just another defense. Real growth asks for something harder. Become more yourself, while becoming more conscious of how that self affects other people. Because every strength has another side. Confidence can become controlling. Honesty can become harsh. Sensitivity can become reactivity. Independence can become distance. Insight can become constant analysis. Passion can become pressure. The strength itself is not the problem. The problem begins when you can only see the strength and never what it turns into when it goes too far. Think of a powerful instrument. A trumpet played at full force in every moment is not more authentic because it is loud. It is simply harder to listen to. The same instrument can be loud, soft, sharp, warm, dramatic, quiet. The power remains. What changes is the player's control. That is a better way to think about intensity. The goal is not to silence it. The goal is to learn how to carry it. When to speak, when to pause, when to ask, when to listen, when to go deeper, and when to let something stay simple. This is not becoming fake, it is gaining range. A person with no control over their intensity is not more authentic than someone who has learned how to use it. They simply have fewer choices. And real freedom requires choice. You should be able to speak honestly without needing to win, feel deeply without making everyone around you responsible for what you feel. Notice something about another person without needing to tell them before they are ready to hear it. Enter a room strongly without needing the whole room to adjust around you. That is what integration begins to look like. Not less personality, more awareness, not less depth, more range, not less honesty, more responsibility for how your honesty lands. And something interesting happens when that begins. Your intensity does not disappear, but people may experience it differently. What once felt like pressure can become presence. What once felt like interrogation can become curiosity. What once felt like emotional force can become warmth. What once felt like domination can become confidence. The energy is still there. Now it has somewhere to go. And relationships are where this gets tested, because relationships do not happen inside your head. They happen between two people, two histories, two people with different needs, different limits, and different ways of handling closeness. You may love deep conversation. Someone else may need more time. You may want to solve a problem immediately. They may need space before they can speak clearly. You may believe honesty means saying everything directly. They may experience the same directness as pressure. Neither person is automatically wrong. The question is whether both people have room to exist. A mature, intense person does not stop being intense. They learn to notice the other person while remaining themselves. You can ask a deep question without demanding an answer. You can disagree without turning disagreement into a test of character. You can tell someone how you feel without making them responsible for fixing the feeling. You can hear, "I need some space," without immediately translating it into, "You are rejecting me." You can hear, "That was too much for me," without automatically hearing, "You need to become smaller." Sometimes a boundary is simply a boundary. This is what I can handle right now. That matters. Because intensity becomes difficult when every limit feels like an insult. And there is something else intense personalities sometimes underestimate. Ordinary connection. Not every conversation needs to become deep. People need to laugh, talk about nothing, sit quietly, be distracted, be boring sometimes, have a bad day without turning it into a psychological investigation. If every interaction has to become meaningful, meaning itself can become exhausting. A strong personality learns to let some moments stay small. That is not shallowness, it is breathing room. Listening matters for the same reason. Not listening while preparing your next insight. Actually listening, letting someone finish, letting them explain themselves badly, letting them describe their own experience without correcting the meaning for them. This can be difficult if you are good at noticing patterns. You may see where their story is going before they do. You may notice what they are avoiding. You may think, "I already know what this is really about." But sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is not say it. Insight is not always helpful simply because it may be accurate. Timing matters, permission matters, the relationship matters. Sometimes restraint is what turns intensity into maturity. The same is true in conflict. Imagine someone tells you, "When you get upset, I feel overwhelmed." You could say, "You're too sensitive. This is who I am." You're afraid of real emotion. Or you could ask, "What am I doing that feels overwhelming?" That question changes the situation. Because you are not erasing yourself. You are gathering information. Maybe they say, "You raise your voice. You don't let me finish. You keep pushing after I've asked for a break. You make everything feel bigger than it needs to be. Now you have something real." You may still disagree. That is fine. Listening does not mean surrendering your view. It means knowing what the other person is actually saying before you defend yourself. And honesty works the same way. People often say, "I'm just being honest." But honesty is not only about whether the words are true, it is also about why, when, and how you say them. You can tell the truth to help, to connect. But you can also tell the truth to punish, to win, to embarrass, to show that you were right. Before saying something difficult, ask, why do I need to say this? Does this person need to hear it? Do they need to hear it now? Am I trying to understand them or defeat them? That does not weaken honesty. It makes it cleaner. There is also freedom in allowing another person to be different without turning the difference into a judgment. Maybe they do not want your kind of closeness. Maybe they process emotions differently. Maybe they enjoy conversations you find boring. Maybe they need more distance. That does not automatically mean one person is deeper. Sometimes you are simply different. And sometimes the mature question is not, how do I make them understand me? It is, can we actually meet each other here? Sometimes the answer will be no. Not every relationship should continue. Not every room is right for you. Not every person will enjoy your personality. You do not have to win everyone over. But there is a difference between saying, we are different, and saying, they couldn't handle me. One leaves room for reality. The other can protect the ego. So what does healthy intensity actually look like? Someone who can feel strongly without making the room responsible for the feeling. Someone who can be direct without becoming cruel. Someone who can go deep without dragging everyone else with them. Someone who can take up space without removing everyone else's. Someone who can hear feedback without immediately shrinking or fighting back. Someone who knows, my personality is mine to carry. Other people are allowed to react to it. Their reaction is information, not automatically a judgment, and not automatically proof that I am right. The next time you feel someone pulling away, notice how quickly your mind tries to explain it. They're intimidated. They don't like honesty. They can't handle intensity. They're too shallow. Pause before completing the story. Not because your first thought is always wrong, because it is only one possibility. Ask yourself 3 questions. What actually happened? What might belong to them? And what might belong to me? Start with what happened. Maybe they became quieter. Maybe they stopped replying as much. Maybe they changed the subject. Maybe they asked for space. Then ask what might belong to them. Maybe they avoid closeness. Maybe difficult conversations frighten them. Maybe your directness touched something they were not ready to face. Maybe they simply want a different kind of relationship. Then ask the harder question. What might belong to me? Did I give them room to speak? Did I keep pushing after they tried to slow things down? Did I assume I understood them instead of asking? Did I take their boundary personally? Did I decide what their reaction meant before giving them a chance to explain it? The goal is not, everything is my fault, and it is not, everything is their problem. The goal is to see clearly enough that you no longer need either extreme. And when the relationship matters, there is something better than guessing. Ask, did something change between us? Was I too intense there? How did that come across to you? And then listen. If they say, yes, that was too much for me, you do not have to disappear. You do not have to become ashamed of who you are. Ask, what part felt like too much? Now you have information. Maybe the answer is about you. Maybe it is about them. Often it is about both. That is how relationships usually work. 2 people bring something into the room. There is one more question worth asking. What happens when nothing intense is happening? No deep conversation, no conflict, nothing important to reveal. Can you stay there? Can you laugh? Talk about something simple? Let silence simply be silence. Can you allow yourself to be interesting without needing to make a strong impression? Sometimes people who are used to intensity begin to mistake calm for emptiness. Ordinary closeness feels like nothing is happening, so they create movement, a harder question, a stronger opinion, a deeper conversation, a conflict that suddenly makes everything feel alive. If you recognize that, do not immediately judge yourself. Just ask, do I want connection right now, or do I want intensity? Those are not always the same thing, and this is where the idea of being too much finally changes. Maybe you really are too much for some people. Some people prefer quieter personalities, some dislike directness, some simply do not want the kind of emotional depth you enjoy. You cannot build your life around being acceptable to everyone. But being disliked does not automatically make you authentic. Being intense does not automatically make you deep. and making someone uncomfortable does not automatically make you right. Maturity begins when you can hold all of those truths at once. You do not have to shrink yourself, but you do have to learn how to carry yourself. Your confidence is yours to carry. Your anger is yours to carry. Your sensitivity is yours to carry. Your passion is yours to carry. Your depth is yours to carry. Other people should not have to carry all of it simply because they entered the room. That is what integration changes. You still speak directly, but you notice when directness becomes force. You still go deep, but you notice when another person wants to stay near the surface. You still feel strongly, but you do not make every feeling the center of the room. You still see patterns, but you do not assume that seeing a pattern gives you the right to define another person. You still take up space, but you leave space too. And that does not make you weaker. It makes your intensity more conscious. There is choice behind it now. You are not constantly defending yourself. You are not forcing the room to understand you. You are simply present. And presence is very different from pressure. So if you have spent years thinking, I am too much for most people, perhaps there's a better question. Not, how do I become less? And not, why is everyone else unable to handle me? But, how do I become fully myself in a way that another person can actually meet? That is harder. Because it asks you to protect what is real in you without turning it into an excuse. To keep your depth without needing to believe you are deeper than everyone else. To keep your honesty while caring about how it lands. To hear, that hurt me, without automatically hearing, you are wrong for being yourself. And to become secure enough that another person's limits do not always feel like an insult. The personality that feels like too much for most people does not necessarily need to become smaller, but it may need to become more conscious, more flexible, more curious, more capable of seeing another person. Because the strongest personality in the room is not the one everyone else has to adjust to. It is the one that can remain fully itself without forcing everyone else to carry its weight.